to 8 months. The death tolls dropped to 0. They got higher prices for the catch, and the bycatch was reduced. We had a fisherman, Pete Halme, come and talk at PERC, and he talked about how the system works now. And they actually have a credit card, debit card they have on the boats. And what happens with bycatch, sometimes they'll be looking for halibut, but they'll catch, say, rockfish instead. Well, rather than throwing them overboard, they can run this card on their boat, and they can see if somebody else has a share of rockfish, which is actually also under IFQ now, and they can buy it right there on the boat. And so that's really helped the fishery, because they used to have to throw it overboard before they got to port. Chances are there's about an 80% chance that fish would die. And the great thing now is that catch share programs have spread all over the United States. There are now 15 within the last basically 15 years. Worldwide, there are now 121 catch share programs. This year in Science magazine, they claim that catch shares, property rights to the ocean, are actually the salvation for the world's fisheries. Real quick on trade and price matter, because I think this audience understands that well. But where we live in the western United States, water is a scarce commodity, and so there's always been a lot of fighting over it, hence this quote by Mark Twain. In the old days, it used to be that the fights were between miners and ranchers for water. Today, the fight is between farmers and fish. And PERC actually started out, the place I spend most of my time, 30 years ago, trying to develop water markets so that willing sellers, willing buyers could trade water, and the price would go up, and the commodity water would be more valued. And back then, there were no state regulations kept that from happening. Today, 10 western states have changed their laws so that water transactions can occur. They can be leased, they can be a split lease, they can be a sell. And so what we've seen is the price of water go up. We've seen thousands of transactions over the past 10 years. We've actually conserved enough water for fish. Just to give you a sense, you could cover the state of New Hampshire with about a foot of water. 6 million acre feet, I'm sorry. And then wealth matters. You've all heard wealthier is healthier, but richer is greener. And sometimes that's a hard concept for people to wrap their hands around. We had last year the president of Bolivia speaking at the UN on Earth Day, actually, said society cannot put its own narrow interest above those of the earth. It is capitalism which is responsible for this crisis. And I feel like actually physically ill when I hear that, because all the evidence suggests the opposite. The tenets of capitalism create wealth, and wealth creates a cleaner environment. There's all sorts of indexes that show this. I just grabbed a couple. The one here on the right is done by Yale and Columbia, and they look at all sorts of environmental indicators. I think they look at 25, and then they pair that with GDP, and you see that environmental quality goes up as GDP goes up. On the left, this is kind of blurry. I'm sorry about that as it's projected, but this is known as Kuznets curves. Basically saying the same thing. As income goes up, so does environmental quality. A guy by the name of Bruce Yandel has been pitching this for 15 years now. Just recently, he was featured in the New York Times and in the Washington Post. And in the Post, I like the point that they bring up is that emissions in China are actually higher than the U.S. now, even though the U.S. economy is 3 times bigger than China. So we all have seen Kermit. We know Kermit and his famous line, "It isn't easy being green." And I think for the mainstream economists that's true, or the mainstream environmentalists that's true. But I think he might not have found it so hard to be green had he discovered markets, and had he discovered that they're actually a frog's best friend. And that's what we spend the majority of our time at our think tank doing. We bring enviropreneurs. We've trademarked the word, so don't take it from us. Enviropreneurs or eco-capitalists, we bring them in from all over the world, and we try to teach them about markets, property rights, contracts, how you can blend markets with the environment. And we've had some amazing participants doing things all over the world. One example that I just was aware of, one of our fellows, our environpreneurs, Joe C., he was doing a project in Florida that I thought you all might find interesting, but he's actually helping start up a company called Eternal Reefs, and this was featured in CNN, and they take people that wish to be buried in the sea when they die. They take their ashes, turn it into a reef, and then lower it down, building a bigger and bigger reef. They've done 300 so far, and then they live on amongst the fish. You can go down and visit their bodies. You can scuba dive down. I mean, that's kind of far out there, but I wanted to give you a sense of just the opportunities that are possible when you mix markets with the environment. So let me just leave you with this quote by John Muir, who was indeed the godfather of the environmental movement. That he founded the Sierra Club. And he says, "The morning stars still sing together, and the world though made is still being made and becoming more beautiful every day." So with that, happy Earth Day. I think we should actually celebrate. I'm happy to answer questions, or if I'm holding you up from the bar, I'll just be here enjoying this beautiful spot. Yes.
Since I'm 80 years old, how do I become...
You told me you were 39.
That was yesterday.
When I got here.
The question is, how do I become a reef?
Externalreefs.com. Your last wish to die with a fish. Externalreefs.com.
I thought that was a medical society.
What does that mean?
Oh, well, you will make a contribution to marine conservation rather than spending money for a coffin and for the cement that goes around the coffin and for the toxins that go into your body when you die.
It's a question of where your ashes go.
Yeah. They actually do, they put the ashes in the reef structure, the man-made structure they then lower. You should check it out.
Let me try a question. I'm rather puzzled that certainly over the last 35, let's say 40 years, the scientific community or science has abandoned the traditions of Aristotle, the traditions of Sir Francis Bacon, known as scientific method. Most of us were taught that sometime in our schooling, in our education. This has been substituted by what? Deductive reasoning, making facts fit what you want them to fit, as rather than, in effect, using a scientific hypothesis. How can this happen? How can the scientific community permit this, for lack of a better word, potential fraud be thrust on everyone on this earth, right on down to our friend from Bolivia?
Right, I think you're right. I mean, any time there's trillions of dollars involved, there's problems, right? Government, science, they get funded by governments. They get funded by the people that are paying this. And I think, I mean, they probably want to be good scientists, but they quickly lose track of the problem. I think you're right on. I mean, ClimateGate, obviously, we see that politics is everywhere.
Then are you saying that scientists can be bought and sold on the market of thought?
I'm afraid so. Unfortunately, I think that's the case sometimes. Obviously, not all.
Then what is the value of scientific method then?
I mean, one thing that I think, one positive thing that ClimateGate has brought to us is a little bit more transparency. And the hope is that if all of this climate research starts to become more transparent, then you'll get a lot of scientists, a lot of people looking at these numbers, and hopefully the good science will float to the top.
Thank you.
Could you maybe comment on how, especially among governments, but also among private organizations related to